We'll begin with Jasmine Crockett.
Yes, thank you. My name is Attorney Jasmine Crockett from Dallas, Texas. I am the president of the Dallas Black Criminal Bar Association. I am against SB 9 personally and on behalf of my organization, and I hail from House District 100. I am a criminal defense attorney by trade and an activist by choice and sometimes obligation. You see, as an African American woman who is also a proud member of Delta Sigma Theta sorority, I feel compelled to fight for those whose voices have oftentimes been silenced. I handle civil rights cases, I've served as a county chair, and I've worked on countless campaigns. While most recently I've assisted a woman by the name of Bridget Moore in Dallas County who was the victim of voter fraud, this bill isn't the way to resolve it. Ms. Moore is a disabled woman who lives in a Dallas Housing Authority building. She has voted by mail for years. Unfortunately, someone chose to take advantage of her inability to get to the polls and literally whited out her selection for mayor. He then went on to tell her to mark the candidate of his choice, and that candidate is now in our runoff. Ms. Moore has options, though. There are laws in place to prosecute the bad actor. These incidents are not rampant, but I'll admit they've occurred. But only the bad actors, not the misinformed, need to be punished. I say that all to say that we all want a fair process no matter what side of the aisle we come from, but in a state that has one of the highest incarceration rates in the country and one of the lowest voter turnouts, we will continue to go in the wrong direction on both of these issues. We should work on a resolution that gets to the heart of the issues. Right now, we are attempting to take a butcher knife to a matter that needs a scalpel. Crystal Mason was spoken of earlier. Let me give you a little bit more information. Crystal was given a 5-year sentence by a Tarrant County judge for attempting to vote. Crystal had no ill intent but was simply misinformed about the fact that she still hadn't been rehabilitated enough for Texas to believe that she, as a woman walking free, should have a say in her government. This bill reduces the mental state even further by allowing citizens to be incarcerated for being aware of facts or circumstances causing a person's ineligibility. We owe our citizens more. Texas is constantly growing. As an attorney licensed in 2 states and federal court, convictions aren't treated the same in every single jurisdiction. Part of Crystal's confusion probably lied in the fact that she was on supervised release, which isn't technically probation. Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Let me just get to the last part, the good part. The late Barbara Jordan, who was a lawyer and a civil rights leader and, more importantly, one of my sorority sisters, she said, "We believe that the people are the source of all governmental power, that the authority of the people is to be extended, not restricted. This can be accomplished only by ensuring that all Texans of all ethnicities, old and young, rich or poor, disabled or not, have a right to vote."
Thank you very much. Members, any questions? Representative Israel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've been looking for somebody with your expertise to ask this question, and thank you for telling the story of Ms. Mason. Section 1.03 of the bill raises the penalty for knowingly making a false statement on a voter registration application from a Class B misdemeanor to a state jail felony. And that means it's punishable by confinement in a state jail for any term of not more than 2 years or less than 180 days, and by a fine not to exceed $10,000. As an attorney with a criminal background, when we go from a class B, that means we're skipping the Class A and going straight to felony.
Absolutely.
What does that mean for people? And knowingly making a false statement, how do you argue that? How do we determine that? I'm very concerned about this language, and I'd like your perspective on it.
So I was referring to that when I was testifying because essentially the way that I read it is the mens rea, which is the culpable mental state, is being lowered to just an awareness of, not something intentional. When we have things such as like when we're going through the various levels of homicide, when it's murder, which is at the top of homicide, that's talking about intentionally or knowingly. And that's why we have our most serious offenses usually require intentionally or knowingly. Unfortunately, this language says knowingly, but it's really not knowingly. Because once again, in speaking about Crystal Mason, she's someone that was on what we call supervised release. We've had these issues happen time and time again when it comes to enhancement paragraphs in the state of Texas. If someone gets in trouble in another state may say, oh, you've got the right to expunge that, and so it doesn't count as anything in Texas. The problem is that when we've got citizens moving in from all different types of places, you may have someone that got in trouble in a different state, and for whatever reason, that state treats that conviction or lack thereof differently than Texas treats it. And now that person may be in a situation like Crystal, because in the feds, they don't have probation or parole. So I think it's a misstep, number one, to make someone a felon. That is something that unfortunately our legislature right now doesn't allow people to get that scarlet letter off their chest. Once you are a felon, there is no going back. And that is a problem, especially if people are making a mistake. So going from a Class B misdemeanor, which is the lowest misdemeanor that we have that is punishable by jail time, is up to 6 months in a county jail and or a fine not to exceed $2,000. The next level would be a Class A misdemeanor, which would then say it's up to 365 days in a county jail and or a fine not to exceed $4,000. It is absolutely ridiculous when we have a shortage of officers on the streets in cities such as Dallas to say now that we need to put felony warrants out for people who may have simply made a mistake. If we're going to make some changes, our changes need to be rooted in making sure that the electorate and the people are informed about what our laws are, to make sure that they are complying with the laws, not trying to throw people in prison when we've got plenty of violent offenders that need to go to prison.
One more question, because I'm not an attorney. I'm a realtor with a vote on the floor of the House of Representatives.
Okay.
So that's why I'm asking these kind of kindergarten law questions. But the word knowingly isn't defined in the election code right now. We're bringing over the definition from the penal code. Would you say one more time so that I can understand it? When I hear knowingly, I think intent. Is that what it means?
For the most part, usually when we're looking at our
I
code,
intended to vote in an inappropriate way. Get to the nut of knowingly.
Knowingly is usually equated almost to an intentionally. I'm trying to think of a way to describe it, but it's like you've got to know that what you're doing, you've got to be specifically aware. I guess that's the best way that I can define it for you. You've got to be specifically aware that what you are doing can cause the result in some way. And I think the problem is that the language that specifically is in here, that would contradict, because it specifically says that if you are aware of circumstances that could cause you to be ineligible, and awareness is not enough. That's a little lower, and I think that the language would actually contradict what we usually look to as intentionally or knowingly, and that is the scary part about if you were aware, because someone such as Crystal would still be caught in this caveat.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Anchia.
Hi, I'm from Dallas, too. I live in the Bishop Arts area, so not too far from you.
I know. I used to be in your district.
Oh, right on. Well, why'd you leave?
It wasn't because of you, I promise.
Okay. I just had a couple questions. I want to folks stay on the Crystal Mason case, because, I think some people on the House floor oftentimes think, well, you're just trying to talk about the worst case scenario, and you're trying to make a mountain out of a molehill, and you really don't need to be worried about it. But I want to walk you through the case of Crystal Mason, because this could be anybody, right? She's a mother of three.
Absolutely.
Who was going to do her civic duty. She went to the polling location under the mistaken belief that she could vote, right? She was not on probation, as you have correctly pointed out. What was she on?
She was on what they call supervised release.
She was on supervised release, right? Which is technically, as you testified earlier, not even probation. Is that right?
No, it's not. The feds don't have what they call probation.
It's an alternative to that, right?
Correct.
And she is informed that she, for some reason, can't vote a regular ballot, so she votes a provisional ballot.
Correct.
Provisional ballots are rarely counted in elections unless you have a close election. So her vote probably didn't even count in that particular election. Now, what's amazing is that she gets a double whammy at this point. She gets she gets convicted of violating her probation or her supervised release
Correct.
at the federal level, where she's sentenced to 10 months. This is a mother of 3, just trying to do her civic duty, sentenced for 10 months. And as you know, in federal court, there's no such thing as good time, right?
Correct.
You're serving day for day.
Correct.
Day for day in federal prison. And on top of that, she has a 5-year state sentence.
Yeah.
And so think about the ramifications of that. And here we are in this bill talking about penalty enhancements for things that people might do just out of mistaken belief, and a raising of the mens rea standard, a lowering of the mens rea standard.
Yes.
And so when people say, "Well, you don't need to worry about it. Everything's going to be fine. You're just going to do your civic duty. You have no worries." Crystal Mason really is the example, and I know there's another example in Tarrant County as well that we could also talk about.
Yes, we
of
could.
someone who is caught in just trying to do the right thing, just trying to go vote. It's the lowest voting state out of the 50 states,
Right.
And suddenly they have to leave their children behind, go to federal prison, and now potentially go to state prison if she doesn't succeed on appeal. To me, that's a real chilling effect and a real deterrent, is it not?
It absolutely is. And to be perfectly honest, for those of you that don't know, Crystal Mason is an African American woman. And to have her be the example of what happens when you try to participate in the process, and we're talking about a demographic of people that have felt disenfranchised for a very long time. And so to have her be the poster child and say, hey, if you mess up, if you make a mistake, you can end up in prison. Guess what? A lot of people, I'm sure that law did exactly what it was intended to do. A lot of people are going to say, never mind, I don't want to take the risk. I know that I've been to prison before, so let me just not vote. And that's not right, because as our laws are set up in the state of Texas right now, you can vote if you've been convicted of a felony. And we should be trying to get those people involved, because guess what? They know exactly how our laws affect their lives or affect the lives of people that have been incarcerated. They have a vested interest in making a selection on who the judges are going to be that may prevail over them one day, or someone that they know. And so I just really caution you, and I hope you feel my passion for this. I've been here all day instead of being in court, and I'm sure somebody wants me in court. But the reality is that we've got to make sure that all of our citizens are participating. We all want to make sure that everyone's voice in Texas is heard, whether you are disabled, whether you're a minority, or whatever the case may be, whether you got in trouble before, you should still be allowed to vote.
Thank you. Members, any other questions? Chair recognizes Representative Middleton. Thank you for your testimony. Our next speaker is Betsy Singleton.